It's the boys from Red Wings Diehards with another episode of Hockeytown Hangout. Last episode, it was a 3-game win streak. This episode, it's a 3-game losing streak. We're going to break it down tonight.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Hockeytown Hangout.
Brings it in, scores! Oh, his first NHL goal is a beauty!
The sickest Detroit Red Wings podcast. It's gonna be sick.
So, last episode, I talked about how, we might have had 3 wins in a row, but it didn't look amazing. It didn't feel like we were controlling the play, for extended periods of time. In a lot of games, a lot of sloppy play in all the zones. And I kind of pumped the brakes on it and said, a team's still kind of trying to figure out their identity. Obviously, the next 3 games, 0-2-1, 1 point in 3 games. Forrest, what have you seen during this little losing streak here?
Well, through 10 games, or 10, 11 games in, they don't have an identity. Their coaching staff doesn't know what they want to do from an identity standpoint. We're trying to put square pegs into round holes. I'll be honest, we've seen some dark seasons here as Red Wings fans, but I really can't think of a darker time than now. This team, like Steve Yzerman, has chosen to play veterans over young players that are not better. That is not how teams get better. We have a coach that doesn't put players in a position to succeed. You don't try to form players into a system. You create a system that your players can be successful in order to put them in a position to succeed. That's what good coaches do, and that's not what ours does. There is a reason that we give up the most shots per game in the NHL, while also coincidentally having the least amount of shot attempts in the NHL. What they're doing is not working. Every day that Derek Lalonde continues to have a job, this team becomes more of a laughingstock. I mean, they are 3 insane goaltender games away from being winless. I mean, 3 games, it was the Talbot shutout, Lions stood on his head for 2 games, and outside of those, we have 4 wins, but every single one, it counts on your goalie to steal it for you and just kind of, I hate to say not play to win, but they just don't look like they're playing to win. It was at the Edmonton game, and they were like the whole third period, it was, let's not blow this 1-goal lead instead of let's try and get a second goal and put this game out of reach against, Stanley Cup finalist. Matt, let's go back to you. I don't want things to get too negative to start off. Well, what are your thoughts right now?
I mean, you have had a shorter leash with Derek Lalonde than I have had for sure. I think everyone kind of knows that at this point. But my leash is starting to get a little short too. Watching them this year, honestly, it looks like Jeff Blashill Red Wings hockey. It looks like dump and chase, mediocre forecheck. Like, really, there's only been, Rasmussen's line has been a decent forechecking line, whatever line he's on. But other than that, it's, non-existent. And if you're going to play a dump and chase style of game and 3 out of your 4 lines are going to be less than average at forechecking, that's not really a recipe for success. So I don't love how sloppy guys just getting lost in the D zone or on the rushes against. The game last night against Winnipeg, those first couple goals they scored, rushes and the guy got behind them and outmuscled them and stuff, and just stuff like that. I mean, and you listen to Derek Lalonde's press conference after a game like that, and the word he uses is unfortunate, describing that. It's not unfortunate, coach. It's unacceptable. You can't be letting guys loose behind you on a rush. You got to stick to them like shit on Velcro. I'm sorry, it's not unfortunate, it's unacceptable. But the forecheck's lousy, the defense is kind of lousy, the 5-on-5 offense is kind of pretty much non-existent at this point. The power play is starting to click a little bit. I just looked before this, it's ranked 9th in the league now, young season, but the penalty kills ranked 30th. And it's all well and good to have a top 10 power play. We liked having a top 10 power play last year, but if your penalty kill is going to be a bottom penalty kill in the league, like it kind of cancels each other out. You know what I mean? And then couple that with no 5-on-5 offense. That's brutal. That's tough to come back from. So I'm starting to get frustrated with the coach in regards to when there's a win, it's like, we did some good things here and there, but it's unsustainable is kind of the tone I take from it in the young season so far. But then when we lose a game, it's like, well, we did some good things. It's just unfortunate it didn't go our way. Like those two kind of philosophies kind of contradict each other a little bit in my mind. Like you have to find a way as the head coach of the team to find a style of play that is sustainable. That is literally your job. You have to understand, and granted, I've been a big Steve Yzerman stan, but I think he's worthy of a little criticism at this point as well, because this philosophy that we had going into the year is we're going to sacrifice offense to become better defensively was the messaging that I was sold from people. And that's all well and good. That's admirable for sure. But the defense is still bad. So I think it's worthy of criticism coming into this year with this plan, and it looks like this. Granted, it's early, 10 games. There's 72 left. There's a lot of runway. It's not like they're mathematically eliminated from postseason contention. It's not like the Atlantic Division. Everyone in the Atlantic Division is kind of running away and lapping them at this point. It's still kind of tight. But I just think that it's really frustrating that, we're 170 some games into the Derek Lalonde era, and it doesn't really feel like they've been all over the place. Last year it was kind of more of a run and gun style, and this year, and you only finished 1 point off the playoff last year. So I think that maybe there was a little, if you want to call it paralysis by overanalysis or whatever you want to say, it's not like the recipe last year was that far off. Like, yes, the defensive game and structure needed to be better, but you shipped out defensive players who maybe were a little bit on the mediocre side defensively, but they were putting up points for you. And now we're at a point right now where our 5-on-5 offense stinks, and we don't have a lot of defensemen who can move the puck super well. I think outside of the Edmondson-Sider pairing, nothing really jumps out at you. It's like, oh, there's something here. Like Johansson, I think we're all hopeful for that he'll turn into something, but this has been going on for 10 years now. At a certain point, it needs to stop being hope and it needs to start being proof. And I think a lot of people are kind of fed up about it at this point because, all of us want them to be successful. We don't come on this podcast to just shit on the team or, to be negative on the team. But I think there's a line that we try to walk where it's like, yeah, we love the team and we support them and we're going to go to games and spend $50 on beer and have a great time. But there's also that line of okay, there's been a lot of time that's passed now. We have a good sample size of what this is. And he inherited a very poor team, 5.5 years ago when he got here, arguably the worst in the league. And we're at a point now where we still haven't made the playoffs. We came close last year, but I think a lot of people right now are just really underwhelmed with how it looks, considering how electric the end of the season was last year. It's kind of, a little bit of a dive off a cliff. It's a new year. It's a new group. You can't really hold last year against them, but there are a lot of key pieces that are still there. So I'm not pressing the panic button just yet, but I am hitting the growing concern button.
You mentioned a couple things that I liked. You said dump and chase. I mean, there's an and chase on the end of that. You can't just dump it in and not do anything about it. You can't just dump it in and give it to the other team. It's dump and chase after the puck. And usually, I'm going to say 99% of the time, that means the first person in there better be putting the body on someone. I'm sick of Rasmussen putting the puck in deep in his 6'6" body and not putting a body on someone. He should be crunching dudes all game long. Granted, I'm a little upset about that in the moment, but Rasmussen's not the only one. Fisher and I'll say sometimes Valeno are the only guys really that go in and put the body on anybody consistently. And that's not enough. You mentioned Steve Yzerman. I was gonna wait a little bit to get to that, but yeah, it is on the general manager. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and doing the same result. Basically, what did they do with this team? They said, "Oh, we almost made the playoffs last season. Let's try and run it back and see if we can get in." Well, there's a reason that half of the teams that made the playoffs the season prior don't make it the next season. That's because everybody's wheeling and dealing and trying to improve and trying to actually make the playoffs. The Wings didn't have an off season to try and make the playoffs. They're trying to put band-aids on things, and you can't cover stuff up for when it's over an 82 game season. Last night, Johansson, yes, he made some errors. I will be happy to watch him make errors all season long if it means that he's going to play the remaining 70 games. He's 24 years old. 24 years old is when most hockey players peak. The fact that this dude is just now getting NHL, like regular NHL time as a 24-year-old is a direct reflection of poor management of this team. There has never been a playoff hockey game at Little Caesars Arena. It's, I think, 7 or 8 seasons at this point, and it doesn't seem like there's any urgency to get any better. I don't know. I think this is the most that I've ever been frustrated as a fan because there's no plan. The coaching staff has no clue what they're doing. They're basically going out there and winging it, and it's obviously not working. When you're getting outshot that consistently, outchanced, like the game of hockey, you have to have the puck on your stick in order to score and win the game. We don't ever have the puck on our stick, and not only do we do that, but we give the puck away so easily. It's mind blowing. It's like, at what point are we gonna do a philosophy change here, Matt? At what point are we gonna say, yeah, the system we're running is not working in the slightest, and it hasn't at any point. Like, yet last year they were at their best when they were counter striking, pack everybody into the defensive zone and just go odd man rush the other way, and just admit that you're gonna get outshot. This season it doesn't seem like that. They don't even want to hold on to the puck. They don't want to get in deep. They don't want to do any of this. And it shows. They're still the paper soft team that they have been pushed around by in the past by these Ottawa teams. And it's going to take new blood all the way around to figure it out. They got to look to younger guys. They got to.
I'm really interested to see how the Buffalo game goes on Saturday because he just, kind of, he didn't lose terribly, but it wasn't a great game by the team at all. So I'm curious.
That's the thing. Like they lost 5-3, but it wasn't a close 5-3. The score was so misleading, and that's the other thing that irks me about the NHL these days. Oh, the Wings are in it because they're 500. The Wings are one of the worst 500 teams in the league. Let's not sugarcoat it. They are. This is a team that they don't control the puck. They try and play defense, but they have a second and third pairing that basically gets played off the ice every single night. That's not sustainable.
I did see that they're averaging 2.7 goals a game, and league worst is 2.1. So you're about half a goal a game off of dead last. So that's obviously not a place that you want to be, especially for a team that put up a lot of goals last year. Again, I just come back to what was the game plan going into the offseason? Obviously, bringing back Patrick Kane was part of the game plan. I think everyone was totally okay with that, especially considering the 1-year deal that he did sign. But, put out a tweet about Jake Wallman the other night, how he had 6 points in 2 games for the first time in his career, had 8 points on the year. That would have been tied for first on the Wings at the time. And people, reply to our tweets, and everyone talking about, well, he was piss poor at defense, mediocre defense, put up points, but he was bad at defense. You have bad defense now with no points. So what's the game plan? And, a couple people even said oh, well, there was, they were clearing out room for a trade in place and the trade in place fell through. What? You're shipping out an asset that's useful in certain regards, relevant to winning hockey games, for a hypothetical, something that's not even agreed to. And again, whether it's Trouba or something else, we don't know the behind the scenes stuff, but that's piss poor asset management, in my opinion. And you have to pay to unload Wallman, but you get a third back for Olimata from the Utah Hockey Club a couple days ago. So that level of like asset in return or asset exchange, whatever you want to call it, is confusing. And I come back to just like watching the team last year and how emotional it felt watching it at the end. Like the game against Montreal with Lucas Raymond's tying it and winning it in overtime. That insane Air Gostisbehere hold at the line on that power play. Dylan Larkin winning in overtime in Toronto. The David Perron goal against Montreal, the second of the back-to-back to keep it alive. Just the sheer emotion you felt watching those games. And ultimately it wasn't enough, but it wasn't enough by this much. It's not like you missed by 8 or 9 points. You were right there. If you could have held on and forced one of those Arizona games to overtime, you would have got in. So I just, it felt like last year they kind of, did start to stray away from that era of Red Wings hockey where it is chip and chase and the forechecking's on some nights and it's not. And we're going to get outshot a lot of nights, but we'll have decent special teams and steal some games here and there. And it felt like last year there was a real identity. Like, yeah, the defense isn't great, but our special teams are good and we're going to put up points and we're going to be one of the, top third offenses in the NHL. And I just think there was too much tweaking done. There was too much offloading of some key pieces on special teams, the power play in particular. Again, that might end up not being that big of a deal in the long run. We'll see. But just a group like that to split it up the way they did with how emotional everything felt. I mean, these are, they're humans. Like we forget that pretty easily sometimes. Yeah. And I don't know. Something about it and the way that it is now, like it doesn't feel the same. Like you watch the game and it feels like you're watching the 21-22 Red Wings, like Blashill's last year. And it was just like, it was a foregone conclusion that Blashill was probably done. And the games looked sloppy and they weren't great to watch most nights. And I think I'm concerned that it's retreating back to that a little bit. I think a lot of Red Wings fans that are interacting with us on Twitter or X, agree with that, but you don't want to completely hit the panic button yet. Like we don't want to do that. A lot of season left, but again, just it feels like we're watching Jeff Blashill Red Wing hockey, and I just can't get over that.
You're right. I mean, we're back at that same point where it feels like we're watching Jeff Blashill hockey, and it's like you're supposed to be out of that by this point. I mean, a lot of these other Detroit teams are team building, trying to create a team that embodies the city. These Red Wings are the exact opposite of that. Like I think you talk about like I think of a Detroit like hockey team. I think of like the grind line. I think of lunch pail guys that aren't afraid to go to work, aren't afraid to throw their body around. But like Darren McCarty, everybody loves Darren McCarty. Darren McCarty was not a star, but we love him because he's just like a normal guy.
Yeah, I think that
I just go ahead.
Really, because you think of like the Tigers run that just happened and how they were written off and they just got hot at the right time and they were never out of it in their own minds and they ended up only being a couple wins away from the ALCS, which is good to see. And a team that young that abandoned kind of an old philosophy and did play all of their kids kind of at one time, and look at what happened. So I think there are some similarities to draw from that. And even from the Lions too. The Lions were a laughing stock for decades. Absolutely a laughing stock for decades. And then when they finally stopped like giving a shit about what everyone had to say and brought in people who also didn't give a shit what anyone else had to say, and they just got to work and they bought into that mindset. And now look what happens. They're one of the best teams in the National Football League. So I think with the Red Wings, when they were successful, for the most part, there wasn't a salary cap for the first 3 of those 4 cups. But that doesn't change the fact that they were a hardworking, hard-nosed team. Like, they had guys who would go into the corners and mow you down. They did have guys on the penalty kill who would sell out and block shots. They did have goalies in the crease who could perform above average on a regular basis. And when you think of some of the personnel on those Red Wings teams that went on deep runs, I mean, anyone now like really kind of fit into that mold of like the great players other than Patrick Kane? Like, I don't really know. Hopefully Dylan Larkin and some of them are well on their way to that, but it's hard to go on deep runs and make the playoffs year after year when you don't have any bona fide superstars on the team. Again, we hope some guys are blossoming into that, but it's never a sure thing. And, we hope that the development of the prospects continues to go well and that some of them can continue to make the team and make an impact at the NHL level. Like, it's all well and good to have a great AHL team. I'm all for that, but I would much, much rather have a great NHL team.
Yeah.
And there's just an identity crisis, man. I keep going back to it, but the city of Detroit, when their sports teams are on, like, there's nothing like it. Like, the buzz in the city when the Tigers made the playoffs, the buzz in the city when the Lions were winning their first playoff games in my entire life. And the Red Wings, just the urgency doesn't appear to be there. Like, I'm sure it is in some regard. It's not like these guys are going to the rink every day and just like staring at the wall. Like, they're obviously trying. But I think just a lot of old philosophies, I think maybe a little gun shy to do things different ways. I mean, it's really easy when you're a Red Wings legend managing a team in Tampa Bay, Florida, to wheel and deal and maybe not be afraid of losing a trade here and there. But when you're the GM of the team that you put on your back and carried to their first cup in 42 years, there's probably a little more pressure in that situation, I would imagine. And if that is the case, I would just encourage him to stop thinking about it that way. Like, you got to do what you got to do. Be aggressive. Do something.
Take a swing for the fence. Now is the time.
Continuing to just trot out old veteran players who are never held accountable for anything. And that's another thing.
3 third or fourth lines, bro.
Yeah.
We have a first line that's basically a really good second line on any kind of Stanley Cup contender team, and then we have 2 third lines and a fourth line. At what point are we just like, okay, yeah, we're at a talent deficit, but why do we continue to put veterans in those spots? Why don't we see if there's a young kid that can step in there? Now, granted, not every young kid's going to be good. Like, we saw Timo Pulkkinen put up 50 in the AHL and not look good in the NHL. These guys don't look like they're having fun. Everybody looks miserable out there. Do you see any smiles when you saw the Tigers play well, the Lions play well? Dudes have smiles on their face, and it's because their coach / manager sets the tone in a way that allows guys to get set up for success. And we don't have that. We have guys that are trying to be forced into a defensively responsible system that does not have any room for creativity, and we dumb these guys down, and then we're like, oh, we wonder why they all stunt their growth when we try to dumb them down and make them focus on defense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with most of what you said. I will say, though, it just, like, an issue that we and a lot of other Wings fans have had is that there always has seemed to be a different standard for the younger, lesser experienced players than there have been for the veterans with several hundred NHL games under their belt. It seems like the leash that those veteran players have is a country mile long, while the leash that rookies and younger and more inexperienced players wear is only a couple feet long. And I hope that's changing. I feel like if the Red Wings were to make a coaching change, whether it's mid-season or after the year, and they elect to not re-sign Derek Lalonde, I would really like to see someone come in who has maybe a little bit of that edge, because for the longest time, like you think back to the 90s and, we weren't that old. So, we base these things off of, consuming those old Stanley Cup videos and interviews and stuff like that. But
Sure.
before Scotty Bowman got there, like the Red Wings were kind of that soft team. And he got there and he brought a level of respect because he had won so many places and already won so many cups. And he changed their DNA a little bit. And they became a harder team to play against, a more blue collar hockey team. They became a little bit nastier with a little more snarl and fighting guys. And there's a lot to be said about that. And I don't want to make it seem like I think that the players don't like playing for Derek Lalonde, but I think there's a difference between not liking playing for a coach and playing for a coach who maybe lets certain things slide for certain guys and not for different guys, and kind of the internal conflict, passive aggressiveness that might create. It's really hard to manage a bunch of personalities, let alone personalities of professional athletes, hockey players who have been given everything for free for the better part of most of their playing career because of how good they are. Have had their asses kissed every step of the way. And in the NHL, I always love watching that the pregame speech that Craig Berube gave to the Blues before Game 7 in 2019. Like somebody who isn't afraid to have a little meanness to him, to call guys out when he sees things that he doesn't like, to hold guys accountable, to, and even the guy like John Tortorella. I mean, I forget who the player was, but it was a veteran player last year where he healthy scratched like 5, 6, 7 games in a row, and Chicklets was talking about it and everything. Like a guy like that who isn't afraid to bench a captain or a
Ruffle
veteran.
feathers, piss someone off. You're not performing, you're not going to be in the lineup. And that, you make a great point. Guys that are veterans, they aren't held to the same standard. If you're a young guy and you're jumping into the lineup, you get the hook way quicker than someone that's been around. And in my opinion, it should be the exact opposite.
And, and I respect the fact that, we weren't good enough to make the playoffs last year, so something had to change. Like we could all agree on that. But shipping out Wallman, not bringing back Gostisbehere, shipping out Fabry, not re-signing Sprong. Like, it's not like I'm upset that any of those things happen. Like, I'm indifferent kind of one way or the other. And it's obviously easy to look back and compare and look at the holes now and think about it. But by eliminating just those 4 guys, you communicate, in my opinion, you communicate to the fan base, we're sacrificing offense to play better defense. So going into the year, it's like we might not score as many goals, but the defense is going to be a lot better. The defense is not better. The defense is the same mediocrity that we've been seeing for the better part of the last decade. And I think at a certain point, it starts to piss fans off because you're telling us, okay, these are the expectations and this is what you're doing. All right, cool. Let's see it. And it's time to see it. And it looks like more of the same stuff that we've been trying to get rid of from the past. So not saying I'm rooting for a coaching change at this point. Like I'm not to that point yet. Like there's still only 2 points off of a wild card spot. It's 10 games into the year. I'm not that pissed off yet, but like I said in that tweet I put out last night, like I don't see a lot of green flags waving at me in the face telling me that this is going to level off in a positive way. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see it at this point.
Luckily, we're early.
Yeah.
I mean, we're 10, 11 games in, and yeah, I just look back to a year ago, and we were riding high at this point. Came out of the gates swinging, looked like a team that had an identity, was on a vengeance, knew what kind of hockey and style they wanted to play, and executed it. And you could, at least I felt at the time, that they were turning the page and things were looking positive. All that progress has gone out the window.
Like in theory, like you could have viewed last year as if Larkin would have played 1 or 2 more games, we probably get in. So like, why not elect to try and run it back? Maybe make like one trade to try and bring in a better defensive defenseman to try and balance that out, give Mo Sider some relief, maybe try and upgrade a little bit in net. Like, I really don't think they needed to tinker with it as much as they did. And, obviously it's easy looking back on it now, but they were not far away last year, and I just think maybe they overthought their moves a little bit. And if there is any truth to that, like when I mentioned earlier, trading Wallman was a preliminary factor because there was something else in the works. Like you can't do that. Like unless it's like about to happen that night, like you can't do that. That's poor asset management. And Gostisbehere, the power play again kind of had a little bit of a redemption yesterday, but still in a game where you get your butt kicked. And it's funny too because like you mentioned, yeah, it's a good thing. It's early and there's a lot of season left. After the first period last night, like that's exactly what Chris Osgood says. He's like, well, if there's a silver lining, there's a lot of game left. So it's like it's kind of like the perfect metaphor. Like, yeah, there's a lot of season left, but boy, if you don't figure it out quick, then 10 games becomes 20, becomes 30, and then you're halfway done with the year in a blink of an eye. So just, still mildly concerning, not full-blown panic yet, but boy, not they're leaving a lot to be desired. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, you can kind of see the writing on the wall. We will see, but a team that gives the most shots in the league and shoots the least amount, I mean, we know that's not a recipe for success. So hopefully they can, I don't know if it's a style change, a coaching change, whatever it is, but something's got to change somewhere along here, right?
A lot of I will say this, haven't heard Joel Quenneville's name in our mentions pretty much ever, and that's been happening a lot over the past couple of days, people bringing up Joel Quenneville. And certainly that would very much piss off a faction of Red Wings and NHL fans, and I think you and I both agree that if something terrible happens to you, you deserve justice and deserve to have your story told. But obviously, Stan Bowman's back in the league with not a lot of blowback that I've heard. What do you make of people asking for a guy like Joel Quenneville to be running the Red Wings bench?
I'm all for it. I mean, if you're telling me that you can bring in a multiple-time Stanley Cup winner to lead your team, I think that's a no-brainer. We just watched AJ Hinch get cast off in the MLB by the Astros. He got punished. He sat out for a year, and he paid he did his time, and now he's back. People are allowed second chances. We've all messed up in one way, shape, or form, and to say that anybody's perfect is just not realistic. Yeah, Joel Quenneville definitely could have done more, but on any given day, any single one of us can do more, is the way I'd put it. And he got punished for it ultimately. And hey, if he was to join our team and say, I'm sorry for what I did, I have no issues with bringing him on board because the coaching talent we have now isn't going to cut it. I would be over the moon. Don't care about any of the baggage. Didn't with AJ Hinch either. If you have a chance to bring in a winner, you do it. No questions asked. That's what good organizations do.
So just kind of to bring this to a close a little bit here, you got your next 5 games: home to the Buffalo Sabres, away at Chicago Blackhawks, away at Toronto Maple Leafs, home against the beloved New York Rangers once again, and 5th one is away at Pittsburgh. So
they need 6 or 7 points in the next 5 games. I mean, if they start off that happening, no, I don't think it's actually going to happen. But in my opinion, they need 6 or 7. You said Buffalo first, and then you said Chicago. In my opinion, those should be 2 dubs, and then the last one, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, yeah, they've got the stars, but they don't have the depth. That's one that I think we should win. Rangers, I'm kind of sick of seeing them at this point. They're an absolute wagon. Not much we can do there, but I think 6 points is attainable. Hey, maybe we get lucky and steal one. I mean, that's going to take 3 games where our goalies steal games with us getting outshot. Do I think it's going to happen? No. I'd say maybe we could get 4 and I'd be happy, but man, I really hate to be doom and gloom, but it's a big Michigan guy. You can see the Michigan shirt here. I kind of liken watching the Red Wings to watching the Michigan offense. I mean, it's just like a horror show. Tonight's Halloween. Like, it really is truly a horror movie. You know what's going to happen. You can see the guy with the chainsaw walking up behind, but they don't look the way. They don't look his way. And you're like, okay, I mean, I get this is a scary movie, but like, come on, guys, this is obvious. And
just a phenomenal analogy there. Great job. I will mention before we sign off, the Toronto game and the Rangers game is a back-to-back. And just based on my quick scroll, it looks like that might be the last game against the Rangers for the year. So at least we get them out of the way early.
I freaking hope so, man. I'm so sick of seeing them. Didn't they win the President's Cup last year?
Maybe.
I
don't know. We haven't won one in forever. I do know that much. Oh boy. Hopefully some brighter days ahead for Red Wings Nation and Hockey Town as a whole. We will continue to watch, tweet, react, and podcast along the way. We appreciate you guys hanging out for us. And come on, boys. Let's get a big win on Saturday. Let's go Wings.
Go Wings, babe.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Hockey Town Hangout on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.